3.38 million. That is the population of Uruguay. Fewer people than the city of Rome, fewer than Barcelona. And Uruguay, this country that fits inside the greater Sao Paulo metropolitan area, has won the World Cup twice, finished fourth 3 separate times, and produced one of the most devastating results in the history of sport. How does a country of 3 million people become one of the most important footballing nations in history? How does Croatia reach a World Cup final 30 years after becoming a country? How does Hungary build the greatest teams of all time? Today, we're going through the small countries that made the World Cup what it is. Because the history of this tournament isn't just written by the richest countries, or the ones with the largest populations. Sometimes the most important chapters belong to the countries nobody expected. Let's start with one of the 8 World Cup champions, Uruguay. 3.38 million people. This is a country roughly the size of the state of Oklahoma. And yet, when you open the history books of world football, Uruguay is everywhere. 2 World Cup titles, 1930 and 1950. The first was on home soil, when Uruguay hosted the inaugural World Cup and won it in front of their own people. But 1950, that's the one that permanently scarred a generation, the Maracanazo. The day Uruguay walked into the Maracanã Stadium in Rio de Janeiro, with nearly 200,000 Brazilians in the stands, needing only a draw to lift the trophy, and won 2-1. A result so devastating it reportedly caused heart attacks, suicides, and a period of national mourning in Brazil that lasted for years. And it wasn't a one-time thing. 4th place in 54-70 and 2010. Uruguay keeps showing up. For a country with the population of a mid-sized European city, that kind of consistency is honestly incredible. Before the World Cup even existed, they won Olympic gold in 1924 and 1928, essentially the 2 biggest international titles available at the time. Uruguay was world-class before most countries had even fully committed to the sport. I'm going to build Uruguay's all-time national team here. In fact, I'll be doing this for every country on this list. Aspoli in goal, the Maracanazo goalkeeper. Nasazi, Godin, Santamaria across the back, 3 different eras, 1 back line. The Andrade cousins on either side. Varela and Francescoli in midfield, a warrior and an artist, both completely, unmistakably Uruguayan. Schiaffino pulling the strings. Scarone and Suarez up front. From 3 million people. I've said it twice and I'll keep saying it because it never stops being extraordinary. Right, quick one before we move on. If this kind of content is your thing, hit subscribe and leave a like. It takes 2 seconds and it means a lot to me. Now, the Netherlands. 18.4 million people. 41,000 square kilometers. Not tiny, but not one of the traditional footballing giants either. And yet the Dutch have arguably built one of the most beautiful, most intellectually rigorous footballing philosophies the sport has ever produced. 3 World Cup finals, 1974, 78, and 2010. 3 finals, 0 titles. That is the cruel irony of Dutch football, a nation that consistently reached the peak and was denied at the final step. In 74, Johan Cruyff's total football side were arguably the best team at the entire tournament and still lost to West Germany. In 78, the final in Buenos Aires was shadowed by political controversy. In 2010, Van Persie and Robben lost to Spain in extra time in Johannesburg. And even when the Dutch don't win, they shape the game. Total football influenced Guardiola, influenced Klopp, influenced how modern pressing football is understood globally. The Netherlands changed the sport and never got the trophy. 4th place in 98, 3rd in 2014. Euro champions in 88, Gullit, Van Basten, Rijkaard in their absolute prime. The Netherlands always seems to have one legendary generation after another. And what would the Netherlands all-time team look like? Van der Sar in goal, Frank de Boer, Koeman, and Ruud Krol. Rijkaard sitting, Neeskens and Gullit through the middle, Bergkamp at 10, Robben on the right, Cruyff on the left, Van Basten through the middle, Cruyff, Van Basten, Robben, 3 different generations, one unbroken footballing tradition, from 18 million people, from a country the size of West Virginia. The Netherlands might be the most intellectually significant footballing nation in history. Portugal, 10.8 million people, 92,000 square kilometers, a country on the far western edge of Europe that for most of its footballing history operated in the shadow of Spain and quietly, consistently produced players of such individual quality that the world had no choice but to pay attention and still didn't win. Third place in 1966, Eusebio, 9 goals, arguably the best player at the entire tournament. Portugal still only finished third. Fourth place in 2006, Figo, Deco, Rui Costa, a young Ronaldo, Ricardo Carvalho, one of the most talented squads they've ever assembled. Still didn't win. Then 2016, a European Championship title that nobody predicted. Ronaldo goes off injured in the first half of the final, and Portugal win with a goal from Eder in extra time. 2 Nations League titles on top of that. Portugal has arguably experienced the best period in its football history over the last 10 years. And what would Portugal's all-time team look like? Rui Patricio in goal, Cancelo, Pepe, Ricardo Carvalho, Hilario at the back, Mario Coluna in defensive midfield, born in Mozambique, the backbone of Benfica and Portugal in the 60s, still one of the most underrated figures in this conversation. Deco in central midfield, Rui Costa at 10, Figo on the right, Ronaldo on the left, Eusebio through the middle. Figo, Ronaldo, and Eusebio in the same attack. I've been to Portugal. I know what football means there. The weight of Benfica versus Sporting, the obsession with the national team. The way Eusebio is still spoken about in Lisbon like he played last week. That passion, across generations, is why that squad exists. From 11 million people, what a great country. Well, now Croatia, 3.82 million people. A country that only declared independence in 1991. There are players in active football right now who are older than Croatia as an independent nation. Think about that for a second, and here is Croatia's World Cup record since independence. 98, third place, first tournament ever, as a 6-year-old country. 2018 runners-up, final, Moscow, lost to France 3-1. 2022 third place again, 3 top 3 finishes. In 30 years of existence, from 3.82 million people. Now, Yugoslavia. I know that's where everyone goes with Croatia, and they're right too. The technical school, the coaching infrastructure, the entire footballing tradition Croatia inherited that was built under a different flag. But here's what I keep coming back to. Yugoslavia also produced Serbia, Bosnia, Slovenia, North Macedonia. Every single one of those countries came from the same system, the same coaching methodology, the same footballing culture. None of them have done what Croatia has done. So the Yugoslav legacy explains the foundation. It doesn't explain the results. That part is Croatian. And there's something else. Several of the players from Croatia's first golden generation, Šuker, Boban, Przinečki, were playing their peak football while their country was going through genuine political instability and conflict. Zvonimir Boban famously got into a physical altercation with a police officer at a match in '90. During a riot between Serbian and Croatian fans, an incident that became a symbol of everything that was about to happen politically. A year later, Croatia was independent. 2 years after that, the war. And 7 years after that, they finished third at the World Cup. Well, and here is the all-time 11. Subasic in goal. Cerna, Vida, Guardiol, Perisic across the defense. Rakitic sitting. Przinečki and Modric through the middle. Boban at 10. Šuker and Mandzukic up front. Modric alone deserves a paragraph. Ballon d'Or. Multiple Champions League titles. 3 World Cup top 3 finishes. Played his best football in his mid-30s. From a country of under 4 million people that didn't exist when he was born. Croatia might be the single most impressive entry on this entire list. A country with the population of Seattle and its metro area achieving great things at the World Cup. Belgium, 11.77 million people. 30,000 square kilometers, bordered by France, the Netherlands, Germany, and Luxembourg. A country more internationally recognized for chocolate and architecture than football, and yet one of Europe's most consistently productive footballing nations. Third place at the 2018 World Cup. The Golden Generation. De Bruyne, Hazard, Lukaku, Courtois, Kompany, Vertonghen, Alderweireld. On paper, one of the most talented squads assembled in the history of European football. They never won a major tournament. That remains one of the most discussed, unfulfilled promises in the modern game. Fourth place in 1986, a strong Belgian side that reached a World Cup semifinal in Mexico and rarely gets the credit it deserves. And an Olympic gold in 1920, one of the earliest international titles in football history. And here's Belgium's all-time 11. Courtois in goal. Giroud, Alderweireld, Kompany, Vertonghen at the back. Witsel sitting. De Bruyne and Sulemans through the middle. Hazard at 10. Lukaku and Van Himst up front. Belgium is one of the countries that has earned the most respect in world football over the last few years. Today, you can definitely consider Belgium a major force in international football. Hungary, 9.59 million people, 93,000 square kilometers, and a footballing history that is simultaneously one of the most glorious and most heartbreaking in football. 2 World Cup finals, 1938 and 1954. The 54 final is one of the most discussed matches in football history. Hungary entered that tournament unbeaten in 4 years. They had just destroyed England 6-3 at Wembley in 53, the first foreign team to ever win there. The Golden Team, Hajduk Kutikasis, Chiber, and Puskás. And then, in the final in Bern, they lost 3-2 to West Germany, a team they had already beaten 8-3 earlier in the same tournament. 3 Olympic golds, 52, 64, 68. Hungary was a consistent world-class force across multiple decades. One of the countries that contributed the most to the evolution of the sport. Today, they're a sleeping giant. But it's still a country that deserves a lot of respect in international football. And now the all-time squad, Grosic's in goal. One of the finest post-war European goalkeepers, full stop. Buzanski, Zacharias, and Mesli at the back, Lantos on the left. Bosic and Sarosi in the engine room. Szoboszlai in a deeper creative role. The one contemporary name carrying this entire tradition on his shoulders right now at Liverpool, Kubala on the left, Coxis on the right, Albert at 10, and Puskás through the middle. Puskás, 84 goals, 85 Hungary appearances, before he moved to Spain and became a legend at Real Madrid as well. 2 separate international careers, both extraordinary in 2 separate countries. There has genuinely never been anyone quite like him. And now, Czech Republic. Well, Czechoslovakia split into 2 countries in 1993, the Czech Republic and Slovakia. The Czech Republic inherited the lion's share of the footballing legacy, and what a legacy it is. 10.9 million people today, 78,000 square kilometers, 2 World Cup final appearances as Czechoslovakia 1934 and 1962, a European Championship title in 1976, and one moment that became unforgettable in football history. Antonín Panenka, Euro 76 final, penalty shootout. He chips it, down the middle. Sepp Maier dives left. The ball bounces in. Czechoslovakia win. That technique now carries his name, used by Zidane in a World Cup final, by Pirlo at a European Championship, by players at every level of the sport ever since. One player invented a genre in the most pressurized moment of his career, and now the Czechia all-time team. Czech in goal, and I'll say it clearly, one of the best Premier League goalkeepers I have ever watched. Berger at right back, Kadlec and Plushkal in the center, Novak on the left, Pejcek sitting, Rosicky and Poborski in the middle, Panenka, obviously, in the deep creative role. Nedved on the left, Ballon d'Or winner, one of the most complete midfielders of his generation, and criminally underrated outside of Central Europe. And Baikan through the middle, this guy, Joseph Baikan, over 800 career goals by some historical accounts. The records from that era are incomplete and disputed, but the contemporary accounts of what he did on a football pitch are extraordinary. Some historians genuinely argue he scored more goals than anyone in the history of the sport, from a country of just 10 million people, one of the most underrated footballing nations in history. Sweden, 10.7 million people, 528,000 square kilometers, the largest country geographically on this list, but in terms of population and footballing resources compared to the traditional giants, Sweden belongs here without question. 1 World Cup final, 1958 on home soil, losing to a 17-year-old Pelé and a Brazilian side that was simply unstoppable. 3rd place in 1950 and 1994. 4th in 1938, Olympic gold in 48. Sweden has been quietly consistent in World Cup football across nearly a century and rarely gets the credit it deserves. Players across every generation, Gunnar Nordahl, Gunnar Gren, Nils Lidholm, Victor Hamren, Henrik Larsson, Zlatan Ibrahimovic. Sweden has produced world-class individual talent in every era of the sport, and now Sweden's all-time team. Hellström in goal, Nilsson, Nordqvist, and Hysén across the back. Hamren on the right wing, Gren in the deeper midfield role, Lidholm as the central midfielder, Skoglund on the left, Nordahl in an advanced position, Larsson and Ibrahimovic as the front two, Ibrahimovic and Larsson up front together. What a strike partnership. Sweden may not be a football powerhouse, but it's a nation with a rich tradition that's consistently present in major competitions. A country that definitely deserves respect. 8 countries, 8 stories that should not be possible. And yet, this is what I love about international football. The narratives don't follow logic. They don't follow population charts or GDP figures or infrastructure reports. They follow something else entirely, something that lives in a dressing room, in a youth academy, in a country's relationship with the game at its most fundamental level. Call it culture. Call it identity. Call it the thing that makes a Uruguayan captain go out alone the night before the Maracanazo and come back ready to win. Size means nothing. Population means nothing. What matters is what happens when you cross that white line. Well, do you agree with this list? Is there a small country I've completely left out that you think belongs here? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely want to see your answers. And if this kind of deep dive into World Cup history is your thing, there's another video on the channel that goes even further. Go and find it. I think you'll enjoy it. I'll see you in the next video. Bye!